Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be continuing the performance modifications to my 2002 Trans Am that you see here. If you didn't catch the last video, I did do an underdrive pulley, talked about kind of a step-by-step on how to do that. If you didn't catch that, I'll link that here up above. But anyway, today we're going to be putting long tube headers and Y-pipe on this car, so let's get started. The first thing we want to do is unhook the battery. It's just an 8mm. Go ahead and unhook the negative side of the battery, making sure that it's not touching anywhere. And then I went ahead and took off the air pump, which is down underneath, and I'll show you that here. To take the air injection pump out, there's 10mm bolts. There's 4 of them in each corner here. Now I've taken the flap and this whole plastic piece out, which is held in by some 10mm bolts. Take all that out of the way. We're gonna get these loose, take this out of the way, unplug it, and unhook the air line that runs to the top side of the fender. Now after the air pump's out, I'm going to go ahead and take the air lines out. So there's 2 10mm bolts on the top side of each header. So we're going to loosen that on both sides, and then I'm probably going to unhook the drive wire. So this is a drive-by wire, or a drive-by cable car, so I'm going to unhook both of these, and you just spin it back and pull that out. Get those out of the way just to make it a little easier. You can see these air injection tubes run back behind the intake, and they've got some clamps on them. So we're going to unhook all of those, and then if you notice in the very back, it does have a diaphragm that hooks in right here. So we're going to unplug that, and then we're going to pull this whole mess of tubing out of the way. We got this out of here. And all it does is there's actually a clip that clips this on in the back. If you just pull straight up, it should pull off. You will have to take the vacuum line off the top side of it. Now, where we took this vacuum line off, we do need to put a plug. And our next step is going to be to take all the coil packs off. And actually we're going to take the coil pack bracket, just a 10mm, and we're going to take the plug wires off on both sides. Now this side's a lot easier to get to than the other side, but believe me, you can put headers on without taking these off, but it makes it way easier and it's not a lot of work to get them out of the way. You can see that I got the coil packs off, the bracket and everything, but in the very back, the piece that held that diaphragm, there is a 15mm bolt that comes in from the back side of the head. Now you can reach that with a ratcheting wrench, and what you need to do is just loosen it, and then this slides right off. You don't have to take it completely out, just get it loose, pull this off, and then you'll be able to take that last 10mm bolt out in order to get the coil pack bracket off. Now that the coil pack's out of the way here on the passenger side, you need to get a 15mm right there, and we're going to unhook the dipstick tube and pull it out of the way. And then we're going to start to loosen up. I'm just going to loosen these. I might take all but 2 of them out. They're 10mm that actually holds the header to the head. So we're going to go ahead and, like I said, loosen all those up, but I'm going to go ahead and take all but 2 out. And the reason why is I haven't loosened the bottom, and so I want it to stay in place and not fall down when I get the bottom loose. Now that we got all the bolts out other than the 2 centers on each side, my next step is I'm going to go ahead and take out the spark plugs. The spark plugs kind of get in the way when you're pulling the header down, so go ahead and take all your spark plugs out, and it's a good time to change them. You know, this car's never had a plug or plug wire change, so I'm going to do both of those while I'm doing the headers, but go ahead and take all your plug wires off, plugs out. Next thing I did was get the car a little higher off the ground, and we came to the bottom side. Now, I went ahead and sprayed all the pieces that I'm going to be taking apart. So you've got the Y-pipe where it connects to the intermediate pipe. You've got the Y-pipe to the actual header on both sides. And then there's 3 in a triangle up above here. So on each side. So that while that's setting, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 7/8 wrench and unhook the front oxygen sensor on both sides. There's a plug right here, and then the oxygen sensor itself will just spin out. I went ahead and took out the back oxygen sensors too. I didn't unplug them, just threaded them out of the pipe. So the next thing I'm going to do is you're going to take a 15 millimeter, and I'm going to actually start in the back. I'm going to hit the back of the Y-pipe first, and then the two brackets that hold it here. There are two bolts in the bracket here, and then the two on either side to get the Y-pipe out of the way. Now that the Y-pipe's out of the way, we're going to go ahead and try to take these three bolts up here out. They're in a triangle pattern. And you're going to need a swivel for this, and you're going to need an impact. Sometimes these are the hardest bolts to take out of the exhaust. So you can do a couple things. You can heat cycle them, so put some heat on them and heat them up, and then they'll come out. Or sometimes you're able to go ahead and take the header loose and thread it out all at once. It's just way easier if you have that loose, but that's my next step. I was able to split those apart. It actually didn't, it wasn't as hard as I thought it might be. So I just let them set with the PB Blaster WD-40 for a little while. So now that we've got those off, we're going to go ahead and take the other two bolts that I had holding the manifolds on. Take those off, and then we'll get the manifolds out of the way, and we'll be ready to start going together with the headers. I wanted to show you guys, I got the driver's side header in. It comes up from the bottom. Both sides will come up from the bottom, but this side I did have to bring the car up quite a bit, so it's a little higher than my stands. I used a jack here in the center, and you can see I've got it quite a ways off the ground, probably a good 3 feet if you're measuring from the front of the bumper down. And what that does is it gives you enough room to get the back side of the header not touching the ground, because the front of it has to come in first. So now we're ready to put the gasket in. When you're putting the gasket in, make sure that there is a gasket side, or a manifold side, and a head side. Make sure you put it in the correct way. But then we're going to start to thread some of the bolts back in. I am using the factory bolts. I am going to put a little anti-seize on them because they are going into an aluminum head. So that's our next step. We'll just get 2 or 3 of these started, and then we'll thread them in, all in, and then I'll give you the torque specs. I wanted to show you guys that it does say manifold side, so that side needs to be touching the header, and it also says down, so it tells you which direction this needs to be pointing when it's touching the manifold. So make sure that you take note of that and put it the correct direction. This is what it looks like all started. I have all the bolts started, and I'm just going to leave it like that for a little bit until I get the other side in, and then I'll go through and run these down to where they're snug, and then we'll torque them up. But it is kind of hard. Sometimes it helps if you have somebody on the bottom side moving it around for you, because you got to hold the gasket and put the bolts in and move the header around. So it will help if you have an extra hand, at least under the car or up here, to thread the bolts in. Now we're ready to thread the passenger side header up through. It's going to thread right up through just like the other side. You're going to bring the back of the header down, the front of the header up, and it's just going to feed right up in beside the head. So you do have to get the car higher off the ground, just like I said on the other side, but should be pretty easy. And once you get it up there, it should stay in order for you to lower it down a little bit and then get your bolts and the gasket started. The header actually slid in there really easy, so now we're ready to put the gasket and start a few of the bolts. Once you have the header in place, the gasket in place, remember, just like we did on the other side, there is a manifold side on the gasket, and I've went ahead and started all my bolts. We need to start to tighten them down. So when you tighten these bolts down, you're going to start in the center and tighten them down, and I just snug these up with a ratcheting wrench, and then you're going to alternate back and forth. So you're going to come to the, after you do the center two, you're going to come to the front, and then the back, and then the very front, and then the very back. And then we'll torque these down. The first pass is, it's 11 foot-pounds. So we're going to start in the middle and alternate working back and forth until we get to the outside bolts. And then the second pass is 18 foot-pounds. Same thing, working from the middle out. And then we're going to do that with both sides, and the headers will be completely bolted up and ready to put the Y-pipe on. Okay, the Y-pipe that I bought comes in 3 pieces. So it's from Texas Speed, and I'll link the headers and the Y-pipe and everything I use. But I'm going to hook it up to the stock exhaust. So this center section that you can see here, ooh, that was noisy. Anyway, that center section is going to go in the stock exhaust. This piece pushes up on the header, and the other piece that has a little bit of an oval shape to it goes on the driver's side to clear the floorboard. So what we're going to use is a rubber mallet to kind of tap these into place. Don't forget to put your clamps. It does come with clamps. You can put them on afterwards if you have to or you forget, but it's a good idea to go ahead and put them on now. Get them kind of in the position that you want. Decide which side you want the bolt on, and then use a rubber mallet and maybe a block of wood to tap these on. And you're going to need to get them as far up as possible. So they'll only go so far, only to this bend, but get them all the way there. I'm going to put the back in, and the very last pieces I'm going to put together are the center 2 pieces. So from this piece here and the piece on the other side to the actual Y itself. That'll be the very last thing that I hook up. The Y-pipe's now all hooked up. Everything's tight. Everything looks like it's in pretty good shape. The only spot that I see that's maybe an issue is it looks like I'm touching the floor on this side. And so from past experience with F-bodies putting the aftermarket Y-pipe on, sometimes if it doesn't hit now, it'll hit when the motor moves. So people's idea of fixing this is to put poly motor mounts in so the motor doesn't move as much. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you here in a little bit what I'm going to do to fix this. I'm actually going to use a piece of radiator hose that I'm going to put on the bottom side of the car in order for there to be some cushion in between and it not to be touching metal on metal. But besides that, I'll show you that later. I'm going to go ahead and put in the caps that come with the Y-pipe to fill the holes that I'm not going to use. Now, if you're using a catted Y-pipe, obviously you're going to want to install your O2 sensors. The next thing after that is I'm going to go ahead and put the O2 sensors in, and actually that's for a wideband. It's on the other side of the header. Go ahead and put in the O2 sensors for the front. Now, when you put long tube headers on basically any car, you're going to find out that your O2 sensors are not long enough. The extension is needed in order to make that connection between the new placing of the oxygen sensor and where it plugs in originally. So I went on Amazon, and I'll list the part down below in the description, but these are some oxygen sensor extensions. These are 24-inch. Sometimes you can get away with 12-inch. I always like to get the 24-inch one. Just because it gives you some extra room to run it in different places, because you want to keep these away from any kind of heat source. So I try to tuck them in. I'm going to put them underneath the heat shields that are factory pieces, the factory heat shields. Your other option is you can go buy a C5 Corvette oxygen sensor, at least for this LS car that I'm doing for the Trans Am. You can buy, and they come longer. So the C5 oxygen sensors have a really long lead on them because of the placing of them. But this is really your cheaper option. These are pretty cheap. I think they were like 20 bucks shipped. So we're going to route these and plug them in. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and put the spark plugs in. Now I'm using NGK iridium plugs. So a couple things. I'm gapping these to 40 thousandths, and I'm also going to use some anti-seize on the threads. Just always a good idea to put some anti-seize on something that's threaded into aluminum. So I'm going to go ahead and put all 8 of these in. If you notice, my coil packs are not on yet. After I put the plugs in, I generally go ahead and start the plug wires, especially the ones in the back, because they're hard to get to. So I push the plug wire on the spark plug itself, and then once I get the coil packs on, then I can reach back in there and plug the other side of the wire into the coil pack. So just the way I do it, like I said, some people don't do it that way. Some people don't even remove the coil packs to do headers, but it just makes things a lot easier to get your hands in there. But that's the next step. As you can see, I went ahead and put the plug wires on. I did reuse the metal boots at the end. These are MSD plug wires, 8.5 millimeter. I'll list that in the description down below as well. But anyway, it makes it a little easier if you go ahead and plug those in, especially in the back, in order to reach. What I do is when I'm putting the coil pack in, I plug the back two in, just because sometimes it's hard to reach that, especially on the passenger side. But now we're ready to put the coil packs in place. And like I said, when you're putting them in place, go ahead and plug the back two plugs in to the coil packs as you're doing it. One thing I didn't talk about, and something you need to do before you put this coil pack on the passenger side, is put the oil dipstick tube back in. Now, I took that out to get the headers off. That is a requirement, but we can put that in. It's sometimes you can get it in after you put the coil packs on, but it makes it a little easier for you to get to the bolt if you go ahead and do it now. Once you have your coil packs put on, make sure that you hook the wiring back up. Just one plug there, the same one we unplugged to take it off. And we're ready to put the throttle cable back into place. And we should be ready to fire it up. So we're all finished up. It's not too hard of a project. It's something that you and a buddy could do in an afternoon. Probably only take you a couple hours. Heck, if you've done it before, it'll probably only take you a couple hours to do it by yourself. But I did have my son come out and help me hold one of the headers while I was bolting it on. That makes things a little simpler. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that and hit that little bell icon down in the corner. That way you know every time I put a new video out. But the next thing we're going to do to this car will be the transmission. So I'm not going to give any ideas of what that's going to be. You're just going to have to tune in and see. So if you want to hit me up on Instagram, guys, it is TW Motorsports. Or if you want to ask me any questions, have any questions, comments for me, drop them down below, or you can email me at twmotorsports@hotmail.com. Thanks for watching, and see what happens next.